Well, welcome. This video is going to cover Mac and the Mac OS along with some basics of how to open and use VMware Fusion, which is a Class 2 hypervisor. I actually have a video on actually using Fusion, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details there, but there's a few things that will show you how they interact between the Mac and the Fusion. But this one I get a lot. I get a request for this to cover for Windows users how to get into the Mac and start using it. And I'm going to kind of equivalate everything to that of a Mac to that of a Windows box so you get an idea how to use it. What we're going to do is we're going to start out with the simple, what will be the control panel on Windows. Now, we're going to go through that in its entirety, and we're going to go through each of the settings, and I'll cover the significant ones that you really need to worry about. We're also going to cover the user interface. We'll probably start a little bit with a basic user interface and then finish with some of the fine-tuning parts of the Mac OS and the iOS version I'm on. And we'll show you then how we use Fusion on top of it. So let's get started. The first thing we have is, just as you would expect of any computer, to have a desktop with your icons on it. We have kind of a menu down the bottom here. This is called the dock, and mine's on a special Genie magnify effect. So when I click something, it pops open one way or it pops open another way. We also have a menu up the top here, and menu is very specifically oriented around what application is in the foreground. And that's a kind of a new thing for Windows users. Aren't used to looking for that menu. So if I open, let's say, Word, and I am doing a blank document, you'll notice that the menu at the top has migrated to a Word icon, a Word menu, except for the Apple, which has remained as is. So Windows users are used to looking here for that menu. So if I click off of that and out to the background, you'll see that menu has changed over to Finder. Finder is the Windows File Explorer equivalent. And if I click back on the Word document, it is actually moving back to that. So you got to be aware that's your main menuing system. Down the bottom, you can actually see the Word icon has a little dot under it, and that means Word is running. If I close Word the way a Windows user would, you'll notice the menu hasn't moved, and the dot is still present down here, which means Word is still actually running. It hasn't closed, it just closed all visible windows. If I click on the background and click back and switch this back to a Finder, the menu for Word is gone, but you can see Windows, again, is still running. So to kill it completely, I can click down here. Now, the click I'm doing is a control click. It is the equivalent of the right click, and I can actually click on the word quit. If the application is open, you can go up here to the actual name of the application, hit quit, or I can use this keystroke, which I often do, which is the command button, which is right to the left of your space bar, and the Q. So I can quit that way as well. If I just want to close this window, I can use the red here, or I can actually close the window with the command W, and I'll do that again. You'll see Word still running, etc. Okay, so if I want to quit, I'm going to quit through Word, quit Word. And now the window's gone and the application's closed. So as you open applications, they will appear down here on your dock. Currently, I'm running Studio One to record the audio part of this lesson. And you'll see it's down here running minimized, and its actual window is right here. If I bring that up, you can see my audio being recorded, and I can minimize that out of the way. So this both shows the window and the application. If you want to keep an icon in the dock all the time, I can control click it and go to options and select keep in dock. And that way when I close the application, it will remain kind of the way the Word icon's remaining here right now. It's closed, but the icon's still here. So I put the most frequently used things on here. So let's go up to this menu here. The Apple menu is mainly system-wide significant things. For example, about this Mac is much like MS-config is on Windows. You can see I'm running Sierra 10 to 12.6, which is the latest version. You can see some bits on my Mac as far as hardware, and I can go here into a system report and get more detailed information about that. helpful if you're thinking of selling it or upgrading or you need to diagnose it. Key thing here is the serial number. That's what the support people need if you have a problem. Other things under the Apple system preferences, which we'll go to in a minute, that's like the control panel on my dock. I have that pinned to my dock, which looks like this, the gray gear. We'll go through that in a minute. The App Store, I'll open the App Store. The App Store, we can actually buy apps. It's just exactly like the iPhone store, except under the updates, it will actually check my machine to see what programs or even OS upgrades or patches there are, and then provide them up here, and then you can apply them. You can see I just applied a Microsoft OneNote, an update to my local copy of lynda.com, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to close that out. Force quit. If you had to Control-Alt-Delete on a Windows machine and bring up Task Manager and kill an app, that's how you do it here. And it does happen on the Mac as much as it happens on a Windows box. So I could actually find an application like, for example, OmniGraffle, force quit it, and boom, it's gone. It just disappeared from my menu. I've killed it the actual bad, not recommended way, but sometimes that's happened, that an application gets locked up. You can restart, shut down from here, or log out. The system preferences we'll cover in a minute. We're going to finish out this bar. You've got your kind of your system tray up here. This is stuff that's running that has kind of a system tray type icon. It's much like the lower right of a Windows environment, except for when you click on something, like I'm going to click on the wireless here, and you can see I can choose my wireless. When you click on that, you get a kind of a context-based drop-down menu, but if you hold Option when you do it, you can get much more different information. I even think the sound one over here, right here, if I click on it, you can ignore that window. If I click on the sound one, I get my outputs and my volume, but if I click on my Option, then click on it, I get sound preferences, the input devices as well. So it's all very specific, and you can customize what shows up here. Do you want to see the percentage of the battery or the runtime? Do you want to see your full name? I can log out from here as well. Those sorts of things. These can all change based on what you're running and what you have installed. Most of the ones that you install are going to run off to the left here. So one of them happens to be this menu, this little snitch popping up. It's a little firewall thing. And some of them are system-based, the sound, the VPN connections, the wireless connections, the AirPlay, battery percentage. Click on that, and you can kind of see the kind of information of show percentage or show power saving settings, and I can Option click it and see more information. And your user and your time, you can customize all that. So one of the significant things over here, there's actually the less significant things, this pop out type of widget menu. I kind of can't stand those things. You got Siri right here. You can click on and talk to Siri. This is your Spotlight Finder, and I can search for, let's just say I want to search for Apple. It'll search through all your data and give you emails, messages, and it gives you a short list here, but I can click on the bottom and say Show All in Finder, and it will show you all the applications folders and that deal with this. So if I was looking for something specific, let's say we were searching for Vatican, and I will find all the documents and stuff that have that particular statement in it. So it's inside the files or emails, et cetera, and I can sort, and you can see I've got some emails with it in here, and I often correspond with the Pope, so I have to have the word Vatican. I'm kidding, of course. So your search window, that can be helpful to find things. You can find things as well as applications by just typing the beginning of the application. It'll find them as well, and then I can hit on that, and it will actually open the application. So that's a significant of the toolbars up top. We're going to go now through the settings. And the settings, I'm only going to cover the significant ones that aren't common sense. So your generals, colors, your desktop screensaver pretty much makes sense. The dock customizes this dock down. Mine's auto hide, and it's got this magnifying effect that you can turn on or off. One of the confusing ones tends to be mission control. Mission control actually is the use of all your windows. And in this case, I'm going to show you something here. I have a hot corner up here set up to launch mission control at the top right of my screen. So when I put my mouse up to the top right of the screen, mission control opens, and you can see I actually don't have one desktop. I have 5. You say, well, how's that possible? Well, they're different desktops. If I click here, I go to one. You don't see mission control's control panel right now. If you're wondering why my background changed, it's just set to change every 5 minutes. I can go back to desktop 2, and I can have this. So it gives you actually more desktops. I've programmed my ability to switch to each one of them through control arrow. So I can go over to the right, back, and switch. So when I open, let's say, my web browser actually opened on a different desktop 1. And I might have programmed that. Let me just check. When I have that open, I can actually go to Firefox. I can control click it, go to options, and you can see it's been assigned to this desktop. So I'm going to close it again. I'm going to go back to desktop 3, and I'm going to open Firefox again, and it should take me back to desktop 1 and launch there. Why is that important? Because I like to have my email open on one desktop, my browsers on another, my file management on a third, and then they don't get cluttered where I have a whole bunch of stuff overlaid one over top of the other. You can actually do stuff like this, which is kind of cool. I can actually drag this and drop it on another desktop if I want to move it somewhere. Now it's on this desktop. You can add and remove desktops. I can simply take off the 5th desktop by Xing it there. And I did it by hovering my mouse over it and just killing it. Or I can add a 5th desktop by just clicking the plus sign at the far right. Work with as many. I recommend you start using at least 2 or 3 to really understand what the benefit is. So let's go back to our settings, and I did that through the Command tab. You can actually tab through the running programs, Command tab. And I'll go back to our settings here. Now when I'm inside something like mission control, to get back to all the settings, I can either go back, which will take me to the previous window I was on, or push all items, which is this little grid. And I usually push that grid, and we can go through the other ones. So security, the main ones you're interested here is the firewall, whether it's on or off. I've turned it off for this lesson, but if you wanted to modify it, you actually have to unlock some of these screens, put your password in, and then you'll have the ability to modify this and turn it on or off. So for the most part, the firewall is what you're going to deal with here. Spotlight deals with the management of this index. So when you search for something, for the most part, you shouldn't touch that or need to. The rest of this is self-evident. This one, the trackpad, I recommend you go through and take your time. The person illustrates exactly what each thing's for. For example, I like a 2-finger tap to a control click. So instead of having to hit control and click to get this menu, and I'm going to do it over here, control click to get my right menu, I can actually just tap 2 fingers and get it, which is really kind of helpful. They have a lot of different things like the lookup detectors. This one's kind of neat. If I'm in words and I have a mouse over something, I can tap 3. Oops. Let me get rid of that. This, you won't see this. This is my firewall that I just tweaked. So if I go over this word feedback and I tap it with 3 fingers, let's go here. Oops. Let's not use that. Let's go here, and I will go over quick look, and I tap it with 3 fingers. It's going to go out to the web and find a definition of that word. It's kind of helpful as you go. Another thing that's nice here is the haptic feedback, which means that their pad doesn't necessarily for real click down. It feels like it does, though. You got scroll and zoom. The only one I typically turn off is the natural direction. Most Windows users are not used to that. And there's other gestures you can use. Example, swiping up with 3 fingers will do the same thing to bring up mission control that I did before. And then I can swipe down to get rid of it. And you can play around with these. I won't go through them all, but some really helpful stuff. These are all self-explanatory. We go down to network. So in the network sections where you manage your wireless connections as well as all your VPN and any other connections. For example, if I find my LAN connection here, I can modify this to be manual, boot P, DHCP, put a static IP in it, whatever I want it to be. And I'll put this back to what it was. Or if I'm already on a network, it will always sort to the top, and I can actually click it and go into advanced and start to see things like, here's all my wireless networks. Now I might want to, it looks like at some point, clear some of this out. A lot of these I don't need. So, for example, this one has no security. I don't remember what this is from. I can just hit minus and remove it. You can also reorder these by taking this and dragging it above one or the other and putting it exactly where you want it. And that's the order they will search in, okay? You can see your current IP addresses. You can renew your lease. Settings here that should automatically come in hardware settings. So I'm not going to modify any of that, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to say don't apply, but go back to all. Control your Bluetooth pair-up devices is done in here, and when you go into here, it automatically goes as discoverable mode, and you can pick up new devices. The sharing center, this is where you turn on certain types of sharing. For example, I have a Sonos system, and the Sonos system is accessing my iTunes on this Mac so they can play over the house. So I have this file shared on, and it's only sharing the music folder. And it gives everyone read-only access so that nobody can edit my stuff. You can also edit the name of your computer here as well. Touch ID, these are self-explanatory things, user groups. I don't use parental controls and stuff. The only last thing is under accessibility. There's one option I really like, and I hope this actually is captured in the video, is there's a zoom feature where I program control and a gesture. So I hold the control key, and then I slide 2 fingers up, and you'll see I can zoom in to quickly get into something. It's like zooming on the screen. It's like having a magnifying glass, so that's helpful as well. But these are all the basic system settings. Down the last row here, these are not system settings from Apple. These are third-party tie-ins like Java. Tuxera NTFS, for example. Let me go ahead and allow that to run. This is, by default, Macintoshes can't write to Windows NTFS formatted drive. So if you have like a removable hard drive that is formatted NTFS from a Windows 10 box, you'll be able to read from it but not write to it. You have to buy that third-party product. It might be 50 or 80 bucks. But you install it and you get the settings here. There's a second one here called Fuse, and I don't really like this one, but I installed it because it had to go with some other program, so probably going to end up removing it at some point. These are all the system preferences, okay? So that's how you manage your control panel, if you will. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to go into Finder. Now Finder is I'm just going to hit Command N for a new Finder window, because if you go up under here and you go File, New Window, Control N. So this is what the window looks like in a File Explorer in a Mac. And up here are some preferences that you can do, and I'll show you some that I did. On the General tab, I typically don't want to see the hard drive inside my machine as an object on my desktop, but everything else I want to see. When I open a new Finder, where does it start me? I can choose that. Tags I don't use, but the ways of colorizing certain things. Like you can tag all, your email from Tim or whatever, your files from Tim, a certain color. The sidebar does control what shows up here. So I pretty much add just about everything there. And then over in this window, I actually take it and I drag it so it's alphabetized, so it makes sense for me. Except for that, I don't know where that came from. The advanced, there's not much to do here, but I do like this option to show the file name extensions. I don't like Windows that hides this from me. I like to see the extension. The name of the file is .doc. I want to see .doc. The other thing is when you perform a search. So if I take this Mac and I search for Vatican, did I want it to search the folder while I was in or the whole Mac? So you can actually change that behavior right down here. I have mine set to the whole Mac, and then if I don't want it to search the whole Mac, I just click this right here and tell it to search the folder I was in, and it finds those resources. So that's your Finder preference. It's nice to set it up. It's nice to get it alphabetized. Here's the Finder window. And the Finder window is used for managing your files. So here's an icon view. Here's a list view, very commonly looked at from the, it looks like a lot like a Windows type of thing. The neat thing about this one, by default, it shows you date created, date modified, last date opened, date added. Then you have this kind of multi-Linux pane looking thing. This is, I think, kind of stolen from Linux, but what you can do, and I'm going to go up into my Tim Petrosky, you can click on Documents, then another folder, And you can kind of navigate the folders this way until you get to the file. When you touch the file, if it can, well, that was a bad choice. If it can, it will show you, let's see, it will show you, and that's not a sales pitch for Man 2, it will show you the image or the document over here if it can give you a preview of it. So this is an interesting view. I rarely use it, but when I do, it's usually for something I need. If you go to this last view, it's much like an album cover view. You can actually navigate with your arrow keys, and it'll actually scroll through imagery that it can show. For the most part, this is the view I use. So this toolbar in Finder can also be customized, and this tool right here I recommend that you add. This is the path or current folder. So when I look at my Mac and I look down the left-hand side and I go Tim Space Gray is the name of my computer, I see my main hard drive here, and that would be your hard drive, your C drive on Mac. When I open it, I see all the folders, and I can drill into users, and I can drill into my name, and this is where all my files are. Documents are here, desktop's here, so if I open desktop, I should see, for example, .minecraft, I do, and the other files that are here. Now, when you're in this view and I double click into this folder, I'm now in the desktop folder. I want to go back up. I can click this button and navigate back up to out of the desktop to all of Tim Petrosky, or all the way to all users, or all the way up to the hard drive itself, or all the way to my computer to see everything back. So it's a navigation path thing. The way you add that is you can simply control click here, or the 2-finger click, customize toolbar, and then you can simply drag and drop things onto here, and you just take the path one and you drag it and then you leave it there, so that you can add whatever you want. You can put dividers in. So that's one I recommend that you take care of. So that's all we have to cover in the Finder window. Okay, from the Mac perspective, you have to know how to get to your applications. So under this menu, or under a Finder, if you go File, New Window, actually it's here, New Finder window, there's always an Applications icon on the left, and this is all the applications installed, kind of like everything in your Start menu on Windows in one screen. Okay, what I typically do is I drag this file down into my dock and I put it down here. Now I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to hit Escape because I've already done that. So if you go down here, I've gone and drugged different folders. I've drugged the applications, my documents, so I can start my documents down here, my downloads folder. These three I use all the time. So if I click applications, I can scroll with my fingers through my applications, and if some of them are in folders, I can click into the folder and it jumps into that folder, or I can go and I can go back. There's a last little icon down here, Open in Finder. It's going to open this folder with all these apps in a Finder window if you need to look at it that way. So however you want to organize your applications or get into your apps, you can do that. I'll actually leave this open in Finder so you can see it here. A couple things about applications on a Mac. Applications on a Mac, for the most part, don't need an install. They are self-contained. So for example, this Geek tool, there's no install for it. I downloaded it, unzipped it, drug it in here, and when I run it, it does what it's supposed to do. You can ignore this little window. This is a new app I just put on here, a new copy of it, and so there's our Geek tool, all right? I'm gonna go ahead and get out of that. If I right-click Geek tool, I can actually, it's almost like a zip file. It's a .app, but I can right-click it, and I can say Show Package Contents. And when you go in there, you see what's inside that executable in all the different things that it makes up, like the frameworks that make it up, and all the different bits and pieces and plugins and resources that it needs to run. This is the reason why I can literally grab this program, one file onto a thumb drive, move it to someone else's Mac, and they now have the program, no install needed. Now, not all of them work that way, but a lot do. The ones that have services that run don't, but ones that do not, like Hashtab, this is a way of hashing a file. So I hash, and then if I wanted to take a file, and let's say this, and I want to get the hashes values for it, there they are. So this is a self-contained program, and it's all in this one file. So that's kind of neat as well. Let me just jump down here. And I'm going to find a folder in my applications called Utilities, and we're going to want that. In your Utilities, there's a thing that manages your hard drive. For example, my hard drive, it tells me how much is used. I have a 2 terabyte drive in here, currently have 1/4 of it free. You can do maintenance on your hard drive there as well. And there's another app you'll probably love in here called Terminal, which is, mine is actually tweaked color-wise to be kind of a transparent black. And this is the command line, print working directory, and it tells me where I am, users. So if I do cd /, I'm at the root, print working directory. I'm now at the root. If I do an /-l, I see all the folders at the root. And you'll notice it looks very much like Linux because it is Linux. So if I want to ping, whatever I want to do, you can do it the terminal prompt like this. So it's one of those tools I use quite a bit. Some regular users don't use them, but networking people and security people tend to use this. So the terminal, you want to be your friend. So when you open it, you're going to want to right click down here and options, keep in dock, so you can always find it. All right, there's also history. If I do history, it gives me the history of all the things that I've been doing here as far as my commands. One of the things you'll notice is that when you go through my file system, and if I go back here, let me go back to the root, that I see a lot of hidden files, these kind of dark grayed out things. You won't see those, and they're hidden because they're hidden through this command. So I'm going to actually turn that off. So this is how you turn it off. You'd have to Google that one. And then I'll do kill all finder, which will kill it and start it again. Oops. Kill all finder, capital F, because it's a Linux box. And now you don't see all those folders. You only see the basic ones. And that Minecraft folder on the desktop is now hidden as well. So, that was just something I did in my terminal shell. And there's tons of commands you can learn.
Hello.
So hopefully you heard that. It should have recorded that through. It did say hello. I don't know if that'll come through my audio, but so this is the Mac system. This is how you get around. This is how you do things. So finally, as we wrap this up, what I'm going to do here is, let me shut down something. There's a couple of utilities that I installed. One of them was called Quicksilver. So if I go to the web and I look for Quicksilver for Mac, there's this app called Quicksilver, and I think this is it. Yes, this is the website. You would download and install this. And what this allows me to do, there's a couple of different looks you can give to it, but I can actually program it to do Control-Q, pop up, and I can type anything. Like I'm going to start to type Excel, E. So it already learned if I hit an E, I'm most likely going to choose Excel, and I just hit enter, and now I'm opening Excel. So it's a quick way to find everything. That app has been around for 100 years, and it's a mainstay of most Mac users. So that's one little tidbit thing that you might want to be aware of. Finally, VMware. So I'm going to install. I installed VMware Fusion, and I'm going to launch it. Somehow I got it off my, it's disappeared from my, there it is. Make sure that's kept in the dock. It is. So VMware, what it does is it provides you a piece of hardware to install an operating system to. Now, I've installed a bunch of them, but for your sake, if you were going to install a new one, first you'd have to have an ISO, an operating system. So let me grab an ISO real quick. I think I have one in my hard drive here somewhere under no backup. And I have a file called, let me do this, ISO. So I think this one is, that's Office. That's Windows 10. I'm going to put that on my desktop. Just copy and paste. I used Command-C to copy. It's kind of like Control-C on the Mac, on the Windows. And I used Command-V. So here's a copy of the CD-ROM or DVD drive for installing Windows. So let's make a machine. Ignore all these because these are machines I already have. So if I hit Add, New, and I do create a custom machine, and I'll go continue, You do want to pick the right operating system that you're going to actually install into that physical hardware, because let's say you bought a piece of Unix hardware for something and it won't run Macintosh software. You can't install Macintosh operating systems on a piece of Unix hardware. It wasn't made for it. So selecting the version you're going to be installing basically selects what hardware to pretend to be. So I'm going to select Windows 10, go continue. I'm going to say create a new hard drive. It's going to do 60 gig. I can change it if I want, but that's fine. Now, if I install a 10 gig operating system and then maybe 5 gigs of my own data, that means it's going to be taking 15 gigs of 60. On my hard drive, it will really only take 15 gigs. It'll only take what you put into it. So I'll go continue. And you can see it's picked 2 gigs of RAM, 60 gig hard drive, Windows 10, the networking share with my Mac. I'll show you what that means in a minute. And we'll just hit finish. Actually, I'm going to hit customize. It's going to want me to save this. I'm going to call this lesson VM. Lesson 10, and I'll save that, and it'll open this up, and it'll open the settings for it. So when you're in VMware, let me close all this, you'll see my lesson 10 machine here. I can go to settings, and the general, just the name, some cleanup if you have extra space. Sharing you can actually enable. So if I, for example, if I have a Windows 10 machine and I wanted to be able to access files on my desktop, I could actually enable shared files and add a folder desktop. Where is it? On the left, and hit add. So that when you go into that machine, it's going to see a VMware shared folders icon on its desktop. And if you go in there, you'll see the word desktop. And if you double click in there, you'll see all these files. So why would you want to do that? Because I only have one copy of these iFly files. I don't want to have one on my Mac and another one on my Windows and wonder which one's the latest one. This way my Windows box can work off the data files on my Mac and keep them in one place. I'm going to remove that for now. The processor memory, you kind of modify. You can give it if it needs more memory, whatever, if you're not going to go with the recommendations there. The display is interesting. The display will actually try to give you the best graphics it can, but once you install the OS, you'll have to install VMware Tools. It'll then go to full resolution Retina, which will be way too small for you. It's way too fine-grained, so you need to come back in here and uncheck that. When that happens, the machine will reboot, and then you'll be good to go. The network adapter, this one's interesting. If you want this virtual machine to operate hidden from the real network behind your Mac, you leave it set for share. This is NAT, internet sharing. If you want it to operate on the network like a real computer, separate from your Mac, you select this, and it will get its own IP address and only have connectivity to the network as it has. So example, if I set it to this and I boot it up and I VPN in somewhere with my Mac, this box will not have access to that VPN. If I have it set to share with my Mac, it will. It'll be hidden behind my Mac and be able to get to the VPN. So we're going to leave that share with my Mac for right now. The other thing we have to do is tell it to use a CD-ROM to install our OS. I'm going to leave this off for right now. We're going to come back to it. I'm going to show you what happens if you don't do this. Other things, you can share your Mac card, your USB, your printer, your camera, some fun stuff there. So we'll leave that go. So what I'm going to do right now is we have lesson 10 built. That was that easy. I'm going to start it up just by pushing this button. And it opens in its own window, and I can actually close this library of virtual machines. And you can see it booted up, but it didn't have an operating system. Why? Because we didn't install one. It doesn't come with an operating system just because I told it it's going to be a Windows 10 machine. I need to make it a Windows 10 machine. So in order to fix it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the settings button. Well, actually, first I'm going to power it off. Virtual machine. Where are you? Shut down. And it'll tell me, you sure you want to do this? You're turning the power off. And I said, sure I do. I'm going to say, I want to configure the CD-ROM to this file over here. So I'm going to go to my desktop, because I need to install Windows 10 into it. And I'll say, make sure it says connected. Otherwise, you're pointing it at the CD-ROM, but you're in essence saying, don't connect it. And then when we power it up, it should see the CD-ROM and start to install Windows 10. And you'll see that right there. So once you're done installing the operating system and going through all the wizards and everything you need to do, you would then disconnect the CD-ROM. And you don't want it to stay connected. I'm going to actually power this guy off. I'm not going to actually install a whole Windows 10 box because I have one all ready to go for us. So let me get rid of that. I'll go back to our virtual machine library. I'm going to actually get rid of our lesson 10 box because I don't need it. And by the way, that moved that to the trash. I need to go down here and then empty the trash to save that space back. I'm going to boot up a Windows 10 utility box. Now the Windows 10 box is booting up. This operates just like a real computer. I don't need this yet either. And there it is. And this one I installed already, so I went through the whole Windows thing, installation. But this one right now, let me just see. It's booting up, so I need to let it finish boot up because it's taking my mouse away. If I go into here and see how its network is set up, this one's set up to bridge. So this should get its own IP address. So there's your Windows 10 box. And this one's on the network just like a regular computer. Now, when you do install these machines, the minute you're done installing them, you're going to want to go up to here, and select, this will say install VMware tools. You're going to want to do that because that's what makes it easy for me to drag my mouse in and out of this VM and not lose control of my mouse. So I'm not going to actually do anything here. I just wanted to show you that. And what I'll do is I'll show you the connectivity. So we're currently on my network, and I'm going to show you over here. So that's my Windows box. Here's my Mac. So my Mac actually has 192.168.250.100, and this has 150. So they're on the same network. They can actually ping each other. My firewall might be on for... I have no idea why that's running so slow, but it is. But it did work. So it might be because of my recording software. And I can ping back the other way as well. And that one's got its firewall on, so I can't ping that way. Now, if I change this to be NATed, it will go to a special IP address between my Mac and it. And you'll see the network card down here disconnect for a second as it changes the settings. Then it will reconnect. And then I should have a different IP address. And that is really weird why that's running so slow. But we'll let that go. We should get a different IP4 address right here, and you'll see that's a address that's specifically between my Mac and something else in the world. But that doesn't mean I can't, ping out to the internet. I still have internet access, I just don't have my own individual internet access. So that's how that's handled. Now there's a video I have on how to use Fusion and how to do some cool stuff with the snapshots and stuff. For this lesson, I'm just going to say, if you are done with your machine, make sure you shut it down just like any other Windows machine, because it has to be powered off properly. And I'll quit this with a Command Q. That is your run through of the Mac OS for a Windows user, so you get used to doing that stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.